that church leaders wrote. I'm very proud to say both of the leaders of the two denominations I belong to were signers on those letters. Geoffrey Black, Jim Moose, and Sharon Watkins from the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And the issue is, it's important that that took place and that has happened. Why? Because there's been silence too long. Folks have been silent over the issues and the morality that surrounds and the efficacy of the issues that surround the occupation. Folks have been vocal about everything else under the sun. But when it comes down to these grave human rights violations, people tended to look the other way for whatever reason, because basically the corporate press and the media and the politicians have educated people to look the other way. Well, we're not looking the other way any longer. We're looking at the facts as they stand. We're looking at the reality, and we're raising up the issue. You see, the problem has been is that somehow if you question aid to Israel, or if you question products that are produced out of illegal settlements in the occupied territory, if you question anything that had to do with Israel, you ran the risk of being labeled anti-Semite. Well, I got news. We're not against anyone, but we're standing up together for human rights, and that means that we're standing up for everyone. You see, people want to divide it and slice it a particular way and tell us what we can talk about and what we can't talk about. And in fact, the U.S. government end up contradicting themselves all the time. For example, in a 2011 State Department report, it reports on Israel and the occupied territories, and it documents a number of human rights violations that have taken place by Israel against Palestinians in those territories. And yet at the same time, they don't want to raise question about whether aid should go in and continue to support human rights violations. Well, that's not somebody else's report. That's the State Department's report. That's the U.S. government's report. That's not a newspaper reporting it. So what we're demanding is that the United States government has the courage to live up to its own words and its own mandates that human rights is to be protected everywhere in the world. If you can question human rights violations on the part of Colombia, and if you can question and threaten to hold back aid because of human rights violations in Zimbabwe, then why can't you do that for human rights violations that take place at the hands of the Israeli government? Now I want to make it very, very clear that we are not standing against anybody, but we're standing up for that which is right and decent, that which is moral and just. We're standing up so that people can have a quality of life, that people can be freed from illegal occupation, that people can be respected as human beings and be able to live out their own sovereignty and destiny. We're standing up for people, and we're standing up against business machinery that continue to grind down the hopes of people in the occupied territories of Gaza or the West Bank. We need to learn to stand together with our brothers and sisters. There are some things that are changing. I was telling someone that a few years ago, I tried to speak to one of my clergy groups about us standing up and raising questions about Israel and the occupation. And I was shot down. And just last Wednesday, that same clergy group put me on the agenda to talk to them about the occupation and what they can do as religious folks. Things are beginning to change. Now we want President Obama to have the courage to live up to a new standard, to talk in a new way, to be truly about justice. Don't just mouth it, do it. Now we need to be also mindful that we need, yes, to end the occupation, we need to cut off supply of money that goes to Israel that supports the illegal imprisonment of folks. And we need to also challenge President Obama about his use of drones. Somebody said that Martin King had a dream, and unfortunately, President Obama has a drone. And we need to challenge him on the contradiction of that, because we are about justice and life. We are about people living in dignified ways, people having their own ability of sovereignty and self-determination, because we know that if we build a world where people are respected, then there will be peace. You can't have peace without justice. It'll never happen. It never will happen. We need to stand up for justice, and that brings about peace. God bless you. Let's continue.
Go make some noise again for Mr. Rev Graylan Hagler. Loud, loud, loud. Not another dollar.
Not another dime. Not another dime. Occupation is a crime.
No, it's
Occupation is a crime. Not another dollar. Not another dollar. Not another dime. Not another dime. Occupation is a crime. Occupation is a crime.
That's what we're about, standing up against injustice, occupation, and human rights violations. It doesn't matter your religion or your color of skin. Open up your eyes, oppression must end. And I got a joke for you guys. I heard, my little sister told me. She said if you go in the mirror and you say Obama 3 times, a drone will appear with an Israeli flag. We'll try it tonight. We'll try it a little later. Just make sure the lights are on. If you're glad you came out and you're glad you're here to stand against the ongoing funding of oppression against innocent people, make some noise. You should be proud of yourself, because you're doing a lot more than other people who are sitting on the sofas having discussions about how they can effectively not change anything in this country. If you've enjoyed this rally so far, make some noise. Again, I would like to thank Jewish Voices for Peace, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, and the Washington Interfaith Alliance for Middle East Peace, as well as Code Pink and the 66 endorsing organizations. The next speaker I'm going to have come up, actually, it's a couple. We're going to have one of them come up. And I'm referring to Cindy and Craig, who are the mother and father of dear Rachel Corrie, who the 23-year-old American peace activist, human rights defender who was brutally murdered by an Israeli bulldozer on March 16, 2003, as she stood non-violently to prevent the demolition of a Palestinian family's home in Rafah, Gaza, that's in Palestine. The Corrie family now run Rachel Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice, which is based out of Olympia, Washington, to continue the work that their dear daughter Rachel begun to advocate for a just and lasting peace in Palestine, Israel. Now, Cindy or Craig? Craig. You guys make some noise for Mr. Craig.
So, Cindy and I flipped a coin to see who would talk here this afternoon, and you guys lost. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the 60,000 people that signed this letter to Obama. I want to point out that that's a lot of people that signed it, but it's not nearly as many people that are with us and understand this issue. I think it's important to look at what's happened over the last few years, as Cindy and I have been involved in this, and see the change. So, as the Reverend said, you couldn't talk about this a couple of years ago, and now you have a big backlash against the activities that are going on that Israel does. Now, when my daughter Rachel was killed, she was crushed to death. I was